Hi sweeties, how are you doing? Welcome to Sim. If this is your first time of coming across this channel, sweetheart, kindly smash that subscribe button, turn your notification on so you are notified each time I upload, and please give this video a thumb up. I appreciate you all so much, and I am saying a very big shout out to every one of you for the love and support you all give me here. I am truly grateful. Thank you all so much. So today we'll be talking something very important, and it's about Tim Wise calling out his community on how they treat black people. And first of all, he started by saying that black people, like, white people always said that black people are taking away their jobs, and for that reason they do not have jobs and all that. And the other way around, they go around and calling black people lazy. How do you call people that you said that they take away your jobs lazy? Because I don't see, like, it's not making sense. Make it make sense, right? And he went further to talk about drugs, how drugs were planted in black community, and how they also go around arresting black people. And black people are even actually not the people that use the drugs the most. He actually said it plainly that they are the ones that use it more. But what? They go around arresting black people and then mass incarcerations and the rest of it. I mean, he actually came all out to open them up and all that. And he also made another point that really caught my attention. He was like, no, you are going to see a black man with great experiences on the job or something. And then you find that with all his experiences, you find out that someone that have like less experience is earning more than the person with great experiences. And then you see black people actually training all white people and some other people on the job, people that do not have experiences about that certain job, right? But it's being trained by a black person, and they are going to get higher rank than the person that trained them and get better salary than the person that trained. And like, who really does that? You know what? Stay glued to the screen. I'm rolling this clip. We'll come back to talk about it. And I absolutely want to read all your comments. Let me know what you all think in the comment section. And straight up, I am rolling the clip.
I got an email from a dude said this to me, like, it's like 3 years ago, young dude, and I knew it was going to be crazy because it was all capital letters. And right? Don't send me. If you don't like me, I don't care. It's fine. I'm a grown man. I don't really need your love or your support, but just don't send me a damn email with all capital letters. Like, you can keep the cap lock off and tell me to go to hell. You don't have to scream it, right? But this kid was screaming it, and he says, I can't find a job. Oh, Jesus, I can't find a job because black and Mexican folks took them all. Really? Blacks and Mexicans took all the jobs, all of them? Right? Then how is it that black folks and Latino folks are significantly more likely than white folks to be out of work? If that were true, why is it that black folks with a college degree are twice as likely as whites with a degree to be out of work? Latino folk with a degree, 50% more likely than white folks with a degree to be out of work. Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders with a degree, 23% more likely than whites with a degree to be out of work. Our indigenous brothers and sisters with a degree, 2/3 more likely than whites with a degree to be out of work. So I don't know where these people of color are taking all these damn jobs, but I know they are not taking them far. It's like they took them a block and a half and were like, yeah, I don't like that job anymore. I'm done with it, right? But this kid was convinced. That's why he couldn't find work. Now, it's sort of ironic, though, because like the next paragraph is the paragraph where he told me that blacks and Mexicans are all lazy. All right, which is it? Because it can't be both, right? Because like if you took all the jobs, I'm pretty sure you're the opposite of lazy. That takes a lot of energy, running around from job to damn job. You can't be lazy and do that. And if you are lazy, I'm pretty sure you didn't even take one job, let alone all the damn jobs. I have this image in my head when people say this, right? Black people taking all the jobs. I have this image of like some farmer in Iowa getting up at 4 a.m. to milk the cows, right? And he walks out to the barn, time to milk the cows, time to milk the cows. And he gets out there, well, these cows have already been milked. Who did this? And then some black dude pops his head around the barn and goes, I did it! I took your job. That doesn't happen. Like, why would anybody believe it? But if a president or a presidential candidate says it, right, and you're hurting and you are out of work, it's easier to blame that scapegoat than it is to figure out that the global economy isn't made for you, isn't made for working people, whether they're black, white, or otherwise, right? It wasn't Mexicans that jacked up Wall Street. It wasn't black folks that destroyed the banking industry. That was just rich, high SAT having white boys. That's who did that. right? It was white men with college degrees and business degrees and high test scores. They're the ones that stole or lost $12.5 trillion of other people's money. And they did all that in 18 months, destroyed the economy. There wasn't a Mexican person in the room, documented or not, right? There wasn't a black person within 50 yards of any of them, right? There were no Asian Americans, no indigenous people, very few, if any, Muslims in the room. It was just white, probably, just dudes that just real smart, and so smart that they lost all that money or stole it or squandered it. And I know people get very uptight when I mention that they were white. Sometimes people are like, why do you have to point out that they were white? That's sort of racist. No, it's descriptive, right? And if they had all been black and brown, somebody would have pointed that shit out. Like if it was all black people and all Mexicans, I'm really confident that somebody would have said, no more banking jobs for blacks and Mexicans, right? If black folks had lost all that money, $12.5 trillion, I guarantee you no bank would have hired a black person for any bank job, not even like a teller job ever again. That would have been it. But white guys destroy the economy and they keep getting bonuses. How does that happen, right? Because we're blaming the wrong people. We're not blaming the people at the top for the job situation that that young man is facing and millions of other white folks are in fact facing. We're instead blaming the people at the bottom because it's what we've done for 400 years, right? Same thing with that border. Oh, we're going to build a wall. That'll solve your problems, right? You think? Is that how capitalism works? Right? You think that's how capitalism works? You just build a wall and all of a sudden everybody gets a big fat raise? Is that what you think happens, right? Of course not. The corporate executives in this country are going to continue to move their jobs overseas. They can continue to send their jobs elsewhere, put their plant in another country because it's cheaper, because there aren't labor protections or environmental protections. Nothing's going to stop that. I know Donald Trump apparently thinks that sending out some really mean tweets at 3:30 in the morning will intimidate corporate executives. Corporate executives don't give a damn about his tweeting habits, man. 3:30 in the morning, Donald Trump sends out a tweet. If you got $40 billion of investment on the line, you don't give a damn what Donald Trump said. You're still going to move those jobs, right? Those jobs are still moving as we speak. He takes credit anytime a company says they're not going to move. He ignores all the times that they continue to do so. Capital will always jump across borders under capitalism. Goods will always cross borders under capitalism. If you allow goods to cross and capital to cross, but you don't let labor cross, looking for a higher wage, guess what? The game is tilted against working people by definition. And not just working people down there, working people up here, who would actually be better off with a larger, more militant working class, fighting for better wages and working conditions for all people in the hemisphere, right? But we don't talk about that because we'd rather blame these folks. If we could just build a wall, everything will be fine, right? Not understanding both the humanitarian component of that, but also the practical component, because that's a cheap and easy answer, isn't it? It's a way of saying that we don't have to actually do the hard work of rebuilding an economy that works for everyone. So we have to understand the past in order to understand what's going on now. It's not just with the presidency, though. It's with the inequalities that you see when you look around. Like, for instance, if you don't understand the history of law enforcement misconduct in black space, in black communities, Black Lives Matter won't make any sense to you. Now, I want to be very clear when I talk about the history of law enforcement misconduct. I'm not talking about every damn cop. I'm not talking about good cops and bad cops, good people and bad people. I'm talking about a history and a culture of law enforcement that has simply not treated black and brown peoples the same as white folks. And anyone who denies that what I just said is true has not studied history and is not competent to speak about it, right? Because the history of policing traces directly back to slave patrols. That was the first iteration of law enforcement on this land in any real formal sense. It was police, after all, who enforced the slave codes. It was police who enforced segregation after slavery was ended. It was police who conspired to engage in lynchings of thousands of black bodies, releasing suspected criminals or people who weren't even suspected of a crime into the hands of the mob. It was police that pulled protesters off of sit-in stools in the 1960s. It was police that turned water cannons and dogs on children in the streets of Birmingham. It was police that did the same and beat protesters on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma. It was cops, along with uniformed military personnel, that rampaged in Mexican-American communities in Los Angeles during the Zoot Suit riots in 1943. That was law enforcement. It wasn't just average people. It was people whose job was to, quote unquote, enforce the law. The problem is, if you live in a society where the laws are unjust, everyone who enforces those laws is engaged in injustice by definition, you see? It's not about good people and bad people. It's about if a system is flawed, the people who enforce that system are culpable. And people of color know that, right? Black folks know, for instance, and brown folk know that it's law enforcement that enforces the war on drugs, which is not about drugs. And we know it's not about drugs. Two reasons that I know it. Number one, the data tells me. What does the data tell me? Every source you want to consult says that white folks use drugs and sell drugs and possess drugs at least as often, if not more often, than black and brown folks do, right? Just as likely to possess, just as likely to use, just as likely to deal. But who gets arrested? We know it's black and brown folks 5 times more likely on average to be incarcerated for drugs. African Americans 4 times more likely to be busted for weed than white folks, even though usage rates for weed are virtually identical. So that's one way that we know it's not about drugs, that we know it's about controlling certain people. And if police are the ones doing that, then why are we surprised that black folks are cynical about policing, right? Why is that shocking? It shouldn't be. The other reason I know the war on drugs is not about drugs is that I'm standing here. And here's what I mean by that. If the war on drugs were actually about drugs, I don't know who'd be giving this talk, but I know it sure as hell wouldn't be me, because I don't think y'all would let me Skype this in from prison, and that's where I'd be right about now if the war on drugs were actually about drugs, and I can admit that because the statute of limitations has expired on this, so nobody can touch me now, right? No, I don't need like applause for weed. Like, that's weird. Like, you don't need to, woo-hoo, he used to get high. Woo, you know. No, it's all good. My asthma came back. I can't do that anymore. But, and I got kids. I'm trying to set an example. But my point is, right, if the war on drugs were really about drugs, myself and a whole lot of other white folks would be doing time, right? Because, I worked in public housing projects as a community organizer for about 15 months in the 90s, and I saw fewer drugs in public housing than I saw on a typical weekend on the 8th floor of the dorm where I lived my freshman year of college at Tulane University, uptown in New Orleans, right? I saw fewer drugs in 15 months in public housing than I saw on a typical Saturday night in room 804, y'all, which I think was my room, but I can't be sure because drugs were involved, but you get the point, right? War on drugs isn't about that. So if law enforcement enforces the law that way, that's why people of color are going to look sideways at cops. It's about understanding the history of law enforcement hasn't been equal, right? And that's why we have to say Black Lives Matter, because the system has said they don't. You know, and if you don't understand that history that I just gave you a real brief thumbnail sketch of, you won't understand Black Lives Matter. You'll respond to it with, well, but all lives, but what about my life? My life matters, doesn't it? Bleep, 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 bleep. What about me? I know your life matters, Snowflake, precious, I know. I know white people's lives matter. I got 2 white children. I understand. God, you don't need to tell me that my children's lives matter. The point is, every cop in America knows their lives matter. And every teacher knows it too. And every boss, every employer, every bank officer who they might go to get a loan, they know their lives matter. It's taken for granted. You don't have to specify that which we take for granted. That's why we don't have to have White History Month, because we got a whole bunch of them. They just go by tricky names like May and June and July and August and shit like that. I just realized I've been forcing the sign language interpreters to like sign like over and over and over again. I'm really sorry about that. I'm not really, but I just think it's weird and funny and unfortunate. Right? You don't have to specify that which is taken for granted. You only have to specify the part that's been left out, right? And not to mention the fact that white America has a really long history of saying all and not meaning it, right? Because we did say, well, we didn't, but Thomas Jefferson did, who I gather is one of white people's favorite white people. Thomas Jefferson said, did he not, all men are created equal, endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But when he said that, he owned over 250 people at the time, so I think he didn't really mean it when he said all, right? And then when the Pledge of Allegiance was written, the first version was in the 1880s, it was redone a couple times in the 20s, and it was finally redone for the last time, I think in 1954. But every version of it ended with the same line. What is that line? With liberty and justice for all. There's that word again, all. But do you think that the white folks who wrote that in the 1880s actually meant all? Of course not. They weren't thinking about black and brown folks. They didn't mean that. So if we have a history of saying all and not meaning it, we're just going to have to understand when black folks remind us that they're part of that by calling out the fact that Black Lives Matter and insisting that we understand, see? But again, if you understand history, what I just said isn't radical. It's not really hard to get your head around. If you don't know that history, because maybe you've grown up in a community where law enforcement did serve and protect and came and got the cat out the tree. and gave little Billy a ride around to show him how gosh darn exciting it was to be a law enforcement officer, then you won't understand that, right? But the people who deal with it, the people who live with it, the people who've experienced the other side of it, right, have a very different perception. And it's not because they have contempt or hatred for the law itself. It's because they know that the law enforcement system is the problem. And you can be a really good cop. You can be the kind of cop that got into it for all the right reasons, right? And yet if you're part of a bad system, it can change you. Right? It can actually warp you. We've seen that. We've seen good cops run out of policing because they dared to inform on their partner for some brutal, unconstitutional, racist stuff that they were doing in the community. And then they're the ones who get run out. Not the brutal one, not the racist one, not the one who's violating the rights of the citizens, but the one who informs on the one that's doing that. They're the ones who end up losing their job. They're the ones who get run out. They're the ones who get their lives threatened from their brothers and sisters in blue. That's a culture. It's not about good and bad people.
This video, and I must really say that this man came all through, because he really came all through. I mean, exposing them. But then I think black people already been know all this, war. I mean, how drugs were also planted by CIA in black community in order to destroy black community. And they also know how they say black people take away their jobs when black people did not do anything. Okay, how do you say that people took away your jobs, and then you are calling those same people that you said that took away your jobs lazy? Because make this make sense. It doesn't make any sense. But then it is them. They wake up any day to gaslight black people and say some shitty things about black people. And then you heard him also say that, I mean, when black people, like a white person and a black person, get a job, black person might have the most experiences and all that for that job, but still they don't get paid enough for doing their job. But the other counterpart get more than enough, even with less experiences and all that. And also I have seen videos where people said that they ended up training, most especially black people, they train people on the job. I mean, people that do not have any single experience, they train them on the job, and when they are done, they end up taking the most prominent positions. I mean, job that you train people for, and they are taking better positions than you. And you train them, you don't even get a raise for training them, but still they come and take better positions and all that. I mean, all these things are things black people see, and the rest of it. And he also mentioned it: mass incarceration, drugs, and all that. Does it mean it's only black people that use drugs, right? But then they are the ones that have the high, maybe more like the highest incarcerations and all that. Why? It is because they are black. So all these things he tried explaining, maybe someone that does not understand black American history or American history will not even understand a little anything from this. But because I have dived into this and I know better, I understand better, then I really understand where he is coming from and what he is saying. Did he lie? Not at all. He actually spoke fact. And that is on period. So I absolutely appreciate Tim Wise for always speaking up. That doesn't black people know it though. But I love the fact that he is educating other people, because I saw black people, I saw Asians and all that there too, listening. But then still, other people will still hear all this and still come out and still want to join white supremacy and the rest of it. But then that is a path they already choose for themselves. I mean, we cannot force people to stick with it. I mean, we cannot force people, especially the minority groups, to stick together so we can fight what is facing us and all that. But then it is a heavenly race. I mean, do your thing and just let's do our thing by ourselves. I think this is where I'm going to draw the curtain. Thank you so much for the support, and see you all in my next video. Bye for now.